Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. In this episode, we follow a Navy SEAL who sees something extraordinary in Kandahar. After 3 years of intense military training, I became a Navy SEAL. I joined my first SEAL team, SEAL Team 2 in Virginia, and my 25-person platoon. We did all of this extra training at the team level to get ready for deployment. And here I was, exactly 3 years later. Almost to the day when I went to boot camp to get ready to go to Afghanistan as a Navy SEAL. But none of that training could have prepared me for how hard my first 2 weeks in Afghanistan would be. So the flight to Afghanistan is pretty normal until you enter Afghanistan airspace and your pilots tell you, "Hey, you've entered Afghanistan airspace." Inside the plane, they turn all the lights to red and get ready to drop very quickly toward the base where we will land. You know, we can't stay in the air any longer than we have to because we could get shot. So there's a very steep drop and then you're told not to go near the windows, right? So, you stay away from the windows in case someone shoots at you. I remember thinking, wow, this is it. We're really here, in a war zone. Like we're nose diving into bases to avoid getting shot at. It was intense, and I'm in my 20s, so I thought it was pretty cool. Then the ramp opened, the back of the plane opened, and we all got out. Now we're inside this very well defended base. You know we're safe in here, and as soon as I opened the door, I was struck by how beautiful the landscape was. When I looked out and saw all the snow-covered mountains, I thought, how is this a war zone? I've been to a lot of beautiful places, but this is one of the best. I don't think I really understood just how different Afghanistan is from where I'm from. When we got to our site, the team we were taking over for wanted to go on an operation that night. We were going to be up in the mountains, and I remember them talking about the cave systems in these mountains. I thought it was weird that we were going to be walking around on these mountains. It's so far away and different. And there might be people hiding in caves, and we might fall into one of their caves by accident. I liked it, but it really scared me. So I was talking about how creepy these caves were, and the interpreter said, you know, what's really creepy is that in 2002, another special operations unit, the Army Green Berets, met a creature in a cave and got into a fight with it. They lost a soldier to this creature, and it was pretty well documented, but it was quickly hushed up. The story was definitely interesting, but I didn't really believe it. No matter what it was, there was a reason for it. It could have been an animal or a person. I didn't start looking into strange things that happened until now. I looked around and found some testimony from a soldier who came forward anonymously and said he was part of this operation in Kandahar where he met this creature. And what struck me about his story was how real it sounds. So what I'm going to do is tell that soldier's story and other witness stories that back it up to try to give you a picture of what happened in Kandahar in 2002, and you can decide if this is true or not. But before we get into today's story, if you like weird, dark, and mysterious stories, you've come to the right place because that's what my channel is all about, and I upload 3 to 5 stories a week. So, if that sounds interesting to you, I'd ask you to click the like button a few times, then subscribe to my channel and make sure all post notifications are turned on, so you don't miss any of the 3 to 4 updates a week. Okay, guys, let's get to the story. In 2002, an army infantry unit just disappeared. They were on patrol in the Kandahar mountain range in Afghanistan when they stopped using their radios and stopped calling in. No one knew what was going on. They didn't call in a TIC, which is short for troops in contact and means that any military unit is nearby. If you're on an operation and start getting shot at, you radio your higher command and say, "Hey troops, we're in contact or TIC." you need to be ready to send reinforcements and have aircraft on standby. They need to be ready to help you, but they won't unless you tell them you're in trouble. If there are a lot of people or something, we'll call it in too early. Units have been known to call it in almost too soon at times. So, the idea that a unit would just disappear without telling anyone about a gunfight, an ambush, or anything else was crazy. It seems a little strange, so they leave. The army decides that they will send their most elite unit because this is obviously a very important thing. So they would send out the army Green Berets, which are their most elite special forces, to find this missing unit. So, one soldier from that group of elite special forces, who only goes by the name Mr. K. U, came forward years later to talk about what happened when they were given this mission. They leave by helicopter and fly about 4 clicks to the Kandahar mountain range. So about 4 kilometers, from where they thought this infantry unit had been last seen. So they land, and they start looking through the mountainside in a pretty methodical way. They knew they were in enemy territory, and could get into a gunfight or be ambushed at any time. There are also a lot of caves in these mountains, which makes it slow going at first. Also, they are looking for this infantry unit that got lost. So, getting to the mountains is just a slow process, and nothing much happened during the first few days. They didn't meet any enemies and didn't see any signs of the missing infantry unit. They just walked through the mountains with a lot of stuff on their backs. At some point, they looked ahead and saw a clear path going up the mountain and around the corner. It looked like a goat trail, since goats used to run around the mountainside, and they decided to go up there. If nothing else, we can go up to where this leads us and see if we can see anything when we look down from the other side of the mountain. So, the team starts to move up this goat trail, and as soon as they do, they start to see small pieces of American military equipment on the ground. Radios have parts, like whip antennas and the case that holds the radio itself. They also found backpacks that looked like they were made for the military, and they started finding pieces of uniforms that had patches from the missing infantry unit. So as they're walking up this trail of broken equipment and uniforms, they start seeing some bone on the ground. They didn't know if it was human bone or what. They start seeing broken bones scattered on their way up to this kind of plateau, and so now the Special Forces team, I mean they're incredibly well trained. I don't just think this way because I like it. I mean the Army Green Berets, the Army Special Forces, they're very similar to the Navy SEAL teams, which I was a part of. 2 different units, no doubt, but very much peers, and the level of training you get in handling situations like this one. Now granted, this one is pretty unique, small black square. You're so well trained that when things start getting dangerous, it's like your training just kicks in and everybody's does. So, I think that when they saw this, they thought that this was an ambush, that this infantry unit had been ambushed, and that they were probably getting close to the ambush site. And so they're taking defensive positions, and they're moving slowly and very tactically up this mountain, and they're keeping their weapons pointed at the leading edge on their way up to the top of this mountain. They get to this plateau. It's like a flat section of the mountain, right? It's like a steep mountain, and there's like this little like shelf almost, and there's more equipment scattered and more bones scattered across it, and there's all these cave entrances right in front of them. It's as if they were intentionally placed so that they fed out onto the shelf, and so they start moving towards the mouth of the caves, and they realized without even getting very close that even though the mouth of these caves are pretty large and everybody could go into the cave, there is a steep drop off, like you walk in and then go straight down, and someone kind of peered over the edge and couldn't see how far it went down, and they decided that it was just too dangerous to go in there because clearly something happened here where American lives were lost. Based on the tattered uniforms and equipment, small black square, and so let's just pull back and take up defensive positions, looking at the entrance to all of these cave entrances. And so as leadership goes down kind of out of the fatal funnels if you will outside of these caves, Mr. K, who's the guy who's told us this whole story, he said he's looking at one of the entrances to the caves and he sees a flash of movement inside of the cave and he looks over at it. He doesn't have time to react to it or anything, and all of a sudden a spear comes flying out of the cave. This big massive lance comes flying out and it goes right through one of his teammates. His name was Dan. And so Dan's down, and so the whole team saw that they didn't see who threw it, but they certainly saw the spear hit Dan. So, they look shocked and just hold their weapons up, not knowing what will happen. Outruns this by Mr. K's account, a 12 to 15 feet tall man with a red beard and red hair down past his shoulders, comes charging out, howling like a war cry. He's got animal skins for clothes. He just looks super dirty and he runs over to Dan to pull the spear out and probably use it again, and the rest of the team at this point is broken out of their shock of what they're seeing and they start engaging this giant, and the giant didn't have a chance to fight back, and in 30 seconds the giant is down too. So Dan's down and then the giant is down and the whole team is like, what just happened? So after the dust had settled and all the shooting had stopped, they went to check on Dan and Dan had passed away, and so they called back into higher headquarters and they're trying to describe what happened. A very large, possibly human creature threw a projectile that hit Dan. And so they sent 2 helicopters out, one to retrieve Dan and the team, the other just to hoist up this very large human-like creature, because they wanted to know what it was and they struggled mightily to get the netting around this big creature. It ended up weighing over 1,100 pounds, had 6 toes on each foot and had 6 fingers on each hand. Are they loaded up? They string it onto this helo and it takes off, and the team gets into the other helicopter and they go back expecting to be debriefed. As soon as they get back to base, the helicopter with the giant would fly to an airfield and they would meet up with a crew of a C-130, which is another big military aircraft. The pilot of that craft would publicly say that he remembers seeing a 12 to 15 feet tall giant person with 6 fingers on each hand, 6 and 6 toes on each foot. And he would say that's what he saw, even though it was later redacted and made top secret. Mr. K and his team, they flew back to the base to be debriefed, and so they had to provide an after-action report and something done in the military. You go out, you do any operation, you come back and you write up what happened. And so Mr. K and his team decided to just be honest about what they saw, and so they described it again in detail. 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. It came out and through the spirit hit Dan. It's this horrible situation, and once they submitted it, their leadership said, you've got to rewrite that, we're not gonna accept that. So Mr. K said they ultimately rewrote it, and it just sounded like a typical engagement in the mountains with the enemy, and it was made top secret and they never saw it again, and that was it. Mr. K said that he and the rest of his team also had to sign non-disclosure agreements to not ever talk about what they saw, and they never got any word about what actually happened, like what did they do with the body of the giant, and they just never got any clarity out of it. It was just basically made top secret, redacted, and they were told, don't talk about it. So it would take until 2016 when MRK finally just said, screw it, I'm going to go public with what I saw because my friend died, and they're acting like this didn't happen, but it did happen. And so that's why we have this detailed report of this mission where they came in contact with the giant of Kandahar. I don't know how I feel about this story. I do think that if there was a place in the world that had the ability to mask or hide giants from being seen by the prying eyes of the human population, it would be Afghanistan. There were times when I was walking around out there that it felt like I was walking around on another planet. But either way, you do have one soldier who was killed by something out in the mountains of Kandahar, and his own teammates say this is what happened, and you have multiple corroborating witness testimony, but a lot of it's been made top secret and redacted, and so we don't really know what happened, or at least as commoners don't know what really happened. So I'd love to hear what you think happened, whether you think this totally happened and it's true, or if you think it was a hoax. If you enjoyed this story, If you would please gently ravage the like button and then also subscribe to my channel and turn on post notifications.